When is she gonna walk? Right? That's the million-dollar question in the O's house right now. As Mika looks more and more likely to take her first steps any day now. She can already pull herself up. She can cruise across the furniture. She can even stand unassisted for about 20 to 30 seconds at a time. And so we know that those steps are coming any day. And with them, a new future. At this very moment, we could be days, hours, or even minutes away from a child who has the capacity to escape from us at any moment. And to be honest, we're not in a huge rush for that to happen, but we just can't help but live into this new future already. I've already started child-proofing all the cabinets in the kitchen. You know, we put all the baby gates up. We can imagine this future with this mobile child. And it wasn't all that long ago that the big question was, when is she going to crawl? Or when is she going to sit up? And now I can't even remember moments when she wasn't crawling or sitting up. It's like as soon as that future arrived, there were all these new futures coming into being. And I think the truth is that for all of us, part of being human is longing for that future. How many days till my next vacation? How many days till winter break? Once I get to college, then things will be different. How about this one? Once the kids are out of the house, then I'll be free. Once I retire, then I can do anything I want. Someday, in the future, things will be just the way I want them to be. But of course, we all know that the curse of being human is that the futures that we want don't always work out the way we expect them to. You might say that's okay, because God knows all the futures. Our future is in God's hands. I believe it. I think that's true. But the words from Isaiah today, they throw a little bit of a wrench into that thought. You see, in this song about the vineyard, God is this vine grower. God is the one who has set up the whole vineyard, planted the seeds, built the watchtower, tilled the soil, made it fertile, planted the best grapes, and then God waited for the future when the grapes would appear, juicy and delicious. God hoped for a certain outcome, but even God didn't know exactly what the future held. Because as it turns out, these aren't actually grapes. They're people. And as we've seen in the stories we've read in church over the last couple weeks, time and time again, God sets the people up for a certain kind of future, one of justice and righteousness and mercy. And time again, the people do their own thing. They put their trust in kings who think only of themselves. They mistreat the poor, needy, and outcast among them. They divide themselves. God has done everything possible, given as much wisdom as possible, sent the people prophets to tell the people exactly how to treat one another. In other words, God has made the ground the most fertile place possible to grow grapes. But instead of good grapes, God gets wild, rotten, disgusting grapes. Not exactly what the vine grower was expecting. Instead of justice, the people prefer bloodshed. Instead of righteousness, a cry. And exasperated, it's like God can't do anything but say, what more could I have done to change the future? Which definitely sounds like something you or I might say, but definitely not something we expect to hear from God. That the future is still uncertain. At this point, I can't help but think of some of my many conversations I've had with parents over the years, especially around baptism. And usually in our baptism classes, we ask the parents, what are your hopes for your child? And they usually say things like, I want them to be a good person. I want them to care for others. I want them to be kind and generous. But the one thing you almost never hear parents say is, we don't have any hopes for the future of our child. Because we can't help but hope for a certain kind of future, especially when it comes to our children. Now, I've also had these conversations on the other side of these hopes. And they sound like this. I don't understand, Pastor. I got my child baptized. I brought them to church. I took them to Sunday school and VBS and church camp. But now, it's like they don't want anything to do with God. Sometimes it sounds like, I thought I raised them with certain values and certain morals, and now I'm starting to question some of the decisions they're making with their life. What more could I have done? I tilled the soil. I planted the seeds. I expected grapes. But now, I got wild grapes. And frankly, I don't know what to do with wild grapes. This story isn't just for parents, by the way. I can recall when I worked in a hospital as a chaplain, I was visiting an older patient's room. I was listening to her reflect on her later years. And she said, I had expected to spend retirement traveling, visiting friends, learning new hobbies, and spending time with people I loved. But then her health started failing. Many of her friends began to die. The expenses piled up as she spent more and more time in the hospital. And on that day, all she could say to me was, I thought these were supposed to be my golden years. It's the same story for people who expected the juicy grapes of being an adult, and instead get the wild grapes of bills and stress. Or people who put in the effort with a partner and expect the perfect grapes of a good relationship, but get only the wild grapes of heartache. So what do we do when we spend so much time living into this future we have planned out, but we don't get the future we hoped for? Where is God then? I'm thankful that these words from Isaiah don't leave us in this question for too long, because just a little later we get another plant metaphor that shows us that God isn't quite done with the wild grapes just yet. And instead of a vineyard, now it's a stump, representing all those destroyed hopes for the people of God, all of those once promising futures that just didn't happen. But God says, out of this stump, out of this destruction, will come a branch, a new leader, a new future for the people. And while this outcome still isn't known either, God has equipped this leader with wisdom and understanding and counsel and might and knowledge. This person will know God closely and will act with justice and righteousness. And as we all look ahead towards this Advent and Christmas season, which is just around the corner, we also look with hope towards the future that God is laying out, where we still don't know what's going to happen. But we know that Jesus is going to be a part of it. And I know that for most of our lives, we have probably assumed that our relationship with God has promised us a certain kind of future. We assume that if we till the soil and if we plant the seeds now, we will receive God's future promises someday. But another thing we tell parents bringing their kids to baptism is that the promises of baptism are not about the future. They are about the now. Baptism, we say, isn't a ticket to heaven after we die. Baptism isn't a reward that we get to cash in at the end of our life. It's about God equipping us for a life of faith today. And as we were reading Isaiah, if those words started to sound familiar, the ones about giving people the spirit of wisdom and understanding and counsel and might and knowledge, if those are familiar, it's because we just said them 20 minutes ago at the baptism. If they're familiar, it's because we said them 3 weeks ago when 30 of our youth affirmed their baptism in this place. And they remind us that the promise of baptism is a promise about the things that God is giving us right now to live a life of faith. The spirit of wisdom and understanding and counsel and might. The grace that God is giving us each and every day. So when is she going to walk? I don't know. The truth is, though, there is no promise of any specific future for me, for her, for any of us, no matter how badly I might hope for it. But every day right now, with her crawling around, with her leaning on the furniture, with her leaning on me, is a gift from God. And whatever future it is that you are hoping for today, whether it's tomorrow or next week or next year or 10 years in the future, that future doesn't hold any more of the gifts of God than today does. And this vineyard story is a reminder from God that we don't have to always constantly be living in the future, because we have been given all the grace we need to give lives of faith and justice and righteousness today. And so that even when that future comes and we are surrounded by wild grapes, all the wild grapes this life has to offer, it doesn't mean that God has given up on us. Just that we might need God's help to take that first step into a new future. Thanks be to God.